Hey guys, Clouds here. So Battlefield 1 has finally been released, and today I'm going to be giving you my first overall impressions on the multiplayer for Battlefield 1. First thing I gotta say is I really like the immersiveness of the game. If you turn off the music, turn off the announcers, and then set it so your faction won't speak your language and instead speak their native language, I really like it. I really recommend at least turning off the music and the announcer. Just try it out because it's so immersive. Second thing that adds to the immersion is the destruction. In Battlefield 4, the destruction was it wasn't always gimmicky, but the Levolution, in my opinion, was very gimmicky and wasn't that interesting. It wasn't very dynamic. But in Battlefield 1, I'm glad to say the more dynamic destruction is back. You can completely tear out buildings, and I'm going to show you an example. I was in this 3-story building and I thought I was, relatively safe from the enemy, but pretty quickly the enemy tank starts shooting shells into the building, carving it out, and eventually I get killed. So yeah, I'm really a fan of that. It's very fun. It's much better than the destruction in Battlefield 4, I would say. The only thing I miss is rubble kills from BF3. Those are not in this game as far as I can tell, but hey, you meet me halfway, DICE, I'll give you credit. Well done. Another thing which adds to the immersion is the dynamic weather system. They kind of had this in Battlefield 4. There was the Paracel Storm, and then, some other maps, they might be sort of cloudy and then they would rain a little bit more. But in Battlefield 1, it is much better. The weather, you know how in some video games, with the weather, when it changes very quickly, and it's very, it's sort of jarring because you instantly realize, it reminds you that you're in a video game, because it's like, it goes from sunny to cloudy to rainy in the span of 5 minutes. But with Battlefield 1, it's a very slow process, and certain weather types aren't guaranteed to happen. I played a round of Empire's Edge, and it was relatively sunny most of the game, but I didn't know that there could be sort of a storm. And on another round of Empire's Edge, it got very stormy, and I really like that. If you have certain weather types for certain maps, if they don't happen each round, it makes it more interesting, and much more immersive. So as far as the immersion goes for the multiplayer, it's very good. Alright, let's take a look at the game modes. First off, Conquest, the main game mode for Battlefield, according to most Battlefield players. And I would say the Conquest mode is extremely well done. I'm very impressed with it. I was always sort of more of a casual fan of Conquest and more of a fan of Rush, but I gotta say, Conquest might be my favorite game mode in Battlefield 1. It's that good. Most of the maps are fairly balanced in their layout. The only map that I think lacks with its Conquest layout is Suez. It's only got 3 capture points. It's just it's not super big, it's sort of a medium open map. It's sort of like if you took Operation Metro, removed all of the choke points, and just put it on a sand dune with some buildings. Overall, I'm not a fan, but all the other Conquest maps, very good. I'm also happy to say that the behemoths in Conquest are very balanced. I was worried that, it might sort of be like, people might want to be on the losing team because the behemoth will just guarantee you a win, but it's not like that. Teams who get the behemoth need to utilize it correctly, or it's not really going to be that effective. And in addition to that, you're not going to see the behemoth every round. A team has to be losing by a certain amount to get the behemoth. So I think that is also a good choice in balancing the behemoths. Okay, next up, Domination, the little brother of Conquest, or little sister, I don't know how you would gender Domination. I think it's very fun. I'm not sure how to explain this, but I think it's definitely better than Domination in Battlefield 4. In Battlefield 4, the Domination maps, it seemed like each capture point was sort of just an afterthought in just a random spot, and it was relatively small and annoying to play. But domination in Battlefield 1 is much better. It's much more entertaining. Also, something to note is the points you get in domination have been upped. In Battlefield 4, and actually in the alpha of Battlefield 1, you would only get 25 points for capturing a domination flag, which is not enough in my opinion to incentivize people to play the objective in domination. When I played domination in Battlefield 4, it basically felt like team deathmatch, and then the flags were just an afterthought. They were really only there to sort of control the spawns, and I mean, are you really gonna work to get 25 points? I wouldn't. But in Battlefield 1, you get 200 points for a capture, which I would say is a fair amount of points for capturing a domination point. So domination is pretty good, I like it. Next up, let's talk about operations. This is a new game mode for Battlefield 1. It's sort of like Turning Point from Battlefront, or I guess you could say, if you haven't played Battlefront, it's sort of like Rush with more players, but instead of telegraph posts or MCOMs to blow up, you have to capture 2 flags on a base. And the interesting thing about operations is it's sort of like each specific operation has like a story. You play across multiple maps. It's very well done. It's very interesting to play, and when you start operations, you get sort of this little cutscene with people talking about it. It's really good. The only thing I kind of don't like about it is the behemoths. Now, in Conquest, you have a very large map. Enemy players are spread out all over. But in Operations, the enemy players are concentrated in a very small area. So the behemoth is much stronger because it has to focus fire on just a small area. And Operations at that point basically becomes spend all your time shooting at the behemoth, which in my opinion is not fun at all. When you're playing it and there's no behemoth, it can be quite fun. It's very hectic. It has a 64 player option, so if you want that sort of chaotic type of rush, both 64 players, Operations would be the game mode to play. Speaking of Rush, my favorite game mode, well, the one change that I like is they made it a 24 player game mode. In Battlefield 4, for the current gen consoles and PC, it was a 32 player game mode, and server renters and owners could actually make it a 64 player game mode. Me personally, I always thought Rush was better with 24 players. I just feel like when you get so many players on Rush, it just becomes too chaotic. Some people like the chaotic gameplay. I'm not a fan. So the 24 player limit in Rush, I'd say it's quite good. But overall, Rush, I just think it's decent. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's horrible. Let me explain to you why I don't think it's that great. In Battlefield 1, Rush has a time limit of 10 minutes for each base. In Battlefield 3, there was no time limit, and in Battlefield 4, I want to say there was a 15-minute time limit for each base. The reason I don't like the timer is, with Rush, let's say you're in a situation, you're attacking, you've only got, say, 10, 13, 15 tickets left. Your next push, you have to make a very concerted effort, and you might want to like slow down and be like, hey, let's stop for a moment and figure out what we're going to do, okay guys? But in Battlefield 1, with a time limit, if you're at, just 10 tickets, you might only have maybe 2 minutes, 1 minute, so you're sort of forced to go all out, and I don't really like it. Actually, in the beta for Battlefield 1, they removed the time limit in Rush, and I think that was much better. So if they would consider doing that, if they would consider removing the time limit, I think that would be a very good change. Another thing that concerns the sort of overall balance in Rush is with the vehicles, they give you certain, vehicle types that you can choose from, but then you can choose any vehicle of that class. So Let's say you can choose a tank, they'll give you the option of a light tank, a land ship, a heavy tank, etc. Now, in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, you couldn't choose multiple types of, say, an armored vehicle. Maps would be balanced around specific vehicles, so on a specific map you might only get an Amtrak, or you might only get one LAV, or one main battle tank, or an Amtrak and a main battle tank. But with Battlefield 1, you can choose whichever type of vehicle you want, and I don't think that's a good thing for Rush. For Conquest, I think it's fairly balanced, but in Rush, you're talking about a very small area, and I think if maps aren't designed specifically with certain vehicles in mind, it can sort of become imbalanced. In addition to that, when you're playing Rush, it's very easy to see that the maps in Battlefield 1 were designed with Conquest in mind, and Rush sort of feels like an afterthought. Some of the bases are quite interesting and quite good, but other bases are just sort of like, hey, here's a Conquest capture point, let's put the base here. And a lot of times when you have even just 24 players in that small area, it can be not that fun. I feel as though some of the Rush bases would be better if the telegraph posts were sort of spaced out just a little, and if the bases had additional pieces of cover added to them. In Battlefield 4, DICE actually went back and worked on the vanilla Rush maps, and they added more cover, they sort of changed the layout of the maps, and in my opinion, it sort of feels like they didn't learn their lesson when they did that. These Rush maps are still sort of, there's not a lot of cover, the bases are sort of, it just feels like an afterthought. And I hate to see that because Rush is my favorite game mode, and I gotta be honest, I don't think it's that great in Battlefield 1. So I really hope that maybe they will take a look at the Rush maps and sort of add more pieces of cover, maybe switch around the bases just to make the telegraph posts more widely spread out. Because when you have objectives in Rush that are so close together, the defending team can just defend both of them at the same time, which is not that good in my opinion. Alright, so that covers the game modes. Let's look at the overall gameplay. As far as vehicles go, tanks are still very strong, although this is just the beginning, this is just the launch of Battlefield 1, and I think when more players unlock anti-tank gadgets, we'll see how strongly tanks will continue to dominate. I did notice that the support class now has the limpet mine, so more classes have AT gadgets. That's a good change. And as far as how the classes are balanced in gunplay, I'd say they've done a very, very good job with it. Each class sort of has a intended role that they fill, and if you try to play that class in a different role, you're probably not going to succeed. The assault class, they have shotguns and SMGs, so they are the CQC class, and if you try to engage targets at a great distance, you can't be successful. Then you've got the medics and the support, they're sort of the mid-range classes, and with the medic and their rifles, you have to sort of make controlled shots, and with the support, this is really interesting. The support weapons actually have a negative spread value, so the more you shoot your gun, the tighter your spread gets, which means that the LMGs are not sort of just high capacity assault rifles, but rather they're weapons intended for sort of a support role, sort of a Overwatch role, where you make suppressive and sustained fire on enemy targets and kill them. So I think that's a very good change. Finally, you have the scout class with the snipers. Again, they've made a very interesting change. The damage on snipers, it's got a parabolic curve. So it starts out where you won't one-hit kill an enemy, but then at a certain distance, there is a sweet spot where you will one-hit kill an enemy, even if it's just a body shot. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's easier for you and your teammates to be more effective at sniping because you just need a body shot if you keep your distance at the right distance for the weapon you have. But it also means that the enemy snipers are much more deadly if they know what they're doing. So it can be frustrating to be killed by snipers who know what they're doing, but it's balanced, and I'd say it's a good change. The scouts now play at their sort of intended distance. So, good change overall, I'd say. The classes are all fairly balanced. Right, so overall, I'm fairly impressed with the multiplayer in Battlefield 1, but there's a few things that I definitely think need work. One of them is squad leaders are no longer demoted if they don't give squad orders. This is a very strange change in my opinion, because in Battlefield 4, this mechanic was put into the game quite a while ago, over a year ago. So for them to not have it in Battlefield 1, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know why they would take this out. I really hope that they add this back in. Another thing concerning consoles is there's no veteran layout for soldier buttons, which means that when you're aiming and shooting, you have to use L2 and R2 on the PS4. Now here's the strangest part of this little dilemma. Ground vehicles and air vehicles do have a veteran layout, but soldiers, there is no veteran layout. I don't know why they would put a veteran layout for vehicles, but not for infantry. It doesn't make sense to me, and I really hope they will add that into the game at some point. One last thing that I think should be added into the game is the ability to edit your loadout in the main menu. This was actually in Battlefield 3 for PS3 and Xbox 360, but for Battlefield 4, they removed this option. Although you could go into the test range and edit your loadout there, or just an empty server. Now for Battlefield 1, there is no test range. That's another thing. Why is there no test range? That was a great addition in Battlefield 4, and I don't get why you would remove that. But yeah, you can't edit your loadout in the menu, so if you want to do that, you have to either do it in-game or do it in an empty server. So this is something we had back in 2011. I really think it should be put in the game. Also the test range. Please put that in there. We had that in 2013. Why is that not in this game? It doesn't make sense to me. Right, so time will tell how much stuff is changed and added in Battlefield 1, but as it is, my first impressions on the multiplayer are quite good. So yeah, pretty good. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.